All right, Ryan. Michigan Wolverines, Penn State Nittany Lions. We talked a whole bunch about this game coming into it. You believed one way, I believed the other. We both thought Penn State would cover the 7.5-point spread. You were pretty confident about the over. I wasn't so sure about that one. We were both dead wrong about the 7.5-point spread of the Nittany Lions covering it, because Michigan in the second half absolutely blew the doors off of them, and they tried to in the first half, got stalled a little bit. Penn State had a couple of quick back-to-back touchdowns to get back into the thing, but I was right about one thing. That running game that Michigan has, Penn State hadn't seen anything even close to it, and it was the big difference in this game at the Big House.
Yeah, it was a huge difference. Michigan had 418 yards rushing against a team that had only given up, I think, 399 yards on the ground all year through their first 5 games. But Michigan was able to create holes, and then the running backs were able to break off some really long runs. Each of Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards had a 60-yard run. You know, Edwards going kind of particularly crazy with 173 yards on averaging
16.
basically like 11 yards a carry. 16 carries, 173 yards is incredible. 2 touchdowns for him, 2 touchdowns for Blake Corum as well, who, kind of not to get outshined. He did get outshined, but 166 yards on 6 yards a carry, which is still really good. And then J.J. McCarthy, gave in 57 rushing yards of his own and had a 20-yard run in there as well. So Michigan was able to do really whatever they wanted to do on the ground, and it resulted in McCarthy not having a really big passing day because he didn't need to. He was 17 to 24. He had the one pick six that bounced off the helmet. He had another throw which probably should have been picked, but ended up being a completion. So maybe those ended up kind of balancing each other out. But 145 yards through the air for JJ with no touchdowns. But that's not even really indicative of the game he played, because I thought he played a pretty good game, outside of those 2 things that I guess could have been critical errors. But the way Michigan was just able to dominate on the ground. And then on defense, too. I think Michigan had 13 first downs, and Penn State probably had 3 at the time, or, maybe even 1. But Michigan totally dominated this game. You look at their time of possession, they had the ball for over 40 minutes in the 60-minute game, right? It was essentially 42 minutes for Michigan, 18 minutes for Penn State. And just in every single facet of the game, Michigan dominated them, and it was really impressive. Michigan lost the turnover battle 1-0, and then they lost the penalty battle as well. They committed 9 penalties, so you probably want to get that cleaned up a little bit. But overall, just really dominant performance.
Yeah, I mean, there's no other word for it other than dominant. Penn State had looked good coming in. I had questioned who they played because they hadn't really played an offense anywhere near what Michigan brings to the table. And the first half at Auburn, it might have been a little bit intimidated going into Auburn, tough place to play, and they gave up about 120 yards rushing in that game, which was the most they'd given up, all year up to this point against Michigan. But it was just, it was just absolute domination, just like you said. For them to hold the ball for as long as they did, have 5 drives of at least 10 plays, a 15-play drive that took almost 10 minutes off the clock, kind of like the way Michigan State ended the Big Ten championship against Iowa all those years ago. I mean, you just sucked their soul out with those kind of drives, and to not allow the Nittany Lions offense to really get on the field, to keep that defense on the field and just keep pounding away at them. I mean, it makes it easier for you to do your job when the defense is so exhausted, but they can't get off the field, and the offense can't sustain any drives to get their defense any rest. It was a perfect storm for Michigan to take complete advantage of with what they do best, which is running the football. They grounded it. They kept the clock going. They kept Penn State offense on the sideline and just absolutely beat up the Nittany Lions. I mean, Penn State was lucky in the first half that, first of all, that they were even in the game. but that Michigan didn't convert those first few drives that were deep into Penn State territory into touchdowns. They were field goals instead, and Penn State was able to get their own touchdown and then take advantage of a fluky turnover to score another quick one. But outside of that, it was all Michigan, and that's all it was. It was Corum and it was Edwards, and they didn't need much help outside of that because Penn State couldn't do a damn thing about it. And I thought this would happen. Not to this degree. I thought they'd dominate the run game. I thought they'd have 200 maybe 250 yards on the ground. I didn't see 400 plus coming and just absolutely embarrassing Penn State.
Yeah, and so what this game did for a lot of people is it solidified Michigan as a national title contender to really just beat down Penn State like that, and now Michigan's looked at in that same tier as Georgia or Ohio State. Tennessee now. Some people might, probably still have Alabama up there, Clemson. But within those teams every year where people look at, it might be a list of 6 teams. Sometimes it might even be as small as 2 or 3, where they're like, this team can win the national title. Now Michigan is part of that group. That's what this game did. That's what this performance did. Anyway, in beating Penn State, is it kind of vaulted Michigan into that upper echelon. It didn't do so much for their ranking. I think they might have only jumped up 1 spot in the AP. But just like the conversation around Michigan, now you're not talking about their weak schedule, because the team that they faced that most people thought at least was pretty good, they're ranked number 10. Michigan just went out there and beat their face in. So now you can't say anything, because Michigan's probably not going to have another test until they play Illinois, and even then, I don't think Illinois is that great. They keep winning, but I think the Big Ten overall is just pretty bad. And then Michigan's going to go to Columbus at the end of the year, and then we're going to kind of see what's up. It's going to be a de facto kind of playing game before you get to go against who's ever in the West, and then blow them out in the Big Ten title game. At least that's how we think things are going to end up playing out for Michigan. And Harbaugh just kind of continues to own James Franklin, which is pretty funny. And the score, it really wasn't indicative of the game. I mean, you said it. Penn State was lucky to be up 14-13 for the time they were. Michigan takes a field goal before halftime to get up by 2 going into the half. But that game could have easily been 55-7 instead of 41-17. So I think 41-17 was even a little bit generous for how not close this game was.
Yeah, I mean, that 15th, 16th, and 17th point came in Penn State's opening drive of the second half. That's it. That's the last time they got near the end zone, any points on the board. They didn't sniff it again the rest of the game, and Michigan just absolutely dominated them. And you brought up, their ranking and all that, because they did fall back one after the, tied at halftime with Indiana and then beat them up pretty good in the second half to win that one by 21, and they fell from 4 to 5. And this time now they went back, back to 4 on the AP. They went to 3 in the coaches. Tennessee leapfrogged them in the AP poll because they squeaked one out against Alabama. This will all play itself out, I think, and I don't think anyone's beating Michigan before the Ohio State game. I would be stunned if they did. As we have a bye week. Michigan and Michigan State have bye weeks before they face each other next week, and we will be hyping up and talking about that plenty in upcoming shows. And I might get lost in the excitement and say something foolish like Michigan State can pull this upset. But I'd be surprised if anyone beats Michigan before they face Ohio State, and that game is going to be the game, no pun intended there with the name of it. It's just, this is what it's going to come down to for the Big Ten, which is nothing new. We've seen this plenty of times. The best teams are playing in the East. Once in a while, Wisconsin gets sniffs out there in the West or something. But the 2 best teams in the Big Ten are Ohio State and Michigan. They're both in the East. They're going to have to face each other to decide who's going to be going to the Big Ten championship. It's a shame, because they should be allowed to play each other twice for the Big Ten championship as well. If you're just going to be honest about who the 2 best teams are in the Big Ten this year, it looks like it's pretty obvious this year. But kudos to Michigan. They absolutely did not overlooked this one. They were ready for this one, and they absolutely dominated. And they look more and more like they really are a national title contender, like you said, and we just got to start watching out for them, especially in the second half. I mean, their second halves are absolutely ridiculous. They were outscoring their opponents 115-45 before this game. Add another 25 points to their end and 3 for the opponents in that one, so it's 140-48 in the second half. Michigan is outscoring opponents by almost 100 points. It's just ridiculous. That's a dangerous team to be dealing with, and unlike other years where the SEC has just looked absolutely more dominant, the Georgias and especially the Alabamas, I don't know if we're really seeing that this year, and there might be a real shot that Michigan or Ohio State has a chance to, to fight with these big dogs out of the SEC.
There might be, and we've seen Ohio State do it before. They won the first college football playoff. But other than that, the Big Ten really hasn't been competitive. Whether you sent Ohio State there and they got shut out, whether you sent Michigan State there and they got shut out, you sent Michigan there and they got blown out. They didn't get shut out, but you got blown out by Georgia last year. And I think you're right. I think the top of the country is a little weaker than what we've seen in years past, and that makes for just more teams having a shot at it. I don't think anyone would call Michigan the favorite right now. I think the betting favorite right now is Ohio State, actually. So obviously still in the Big Ten. But last year when we went into the Georgia-Michigan matchup, you kind of figured Michigan didn't have a chance to win. And this year, there's still a lot of football left to be played, granted. But this year, where we're sitting right now, on Tuesday, October 18th, it doesn't seem like Michigan can't beat Georgia. They wouldn't be favored to beat Georgia, but I wouldn't say flat out it just couldn't happen.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. I think this is as good of a chance as any the Big Ten has had to really fight for a national championship. Unless Georgia has just been, it's the regular season and we'll turn it on when it matters. I just don't see it. But we got a couple months till we got to figure that one out. So kudos to Michigan, great win against Penn State. They get a week off, then they're welcoming the Michigan State Spartans in for the crosstown rivalry.
Hey, Ryan Griffin here. Thank you so much for watching today's episode of Griffin and Bass. Be sure to give us your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to click the bell to receive the latest notifications from DSN and subscribe for breaking news, community blogs, polls, contests, and other content.